She was invisible to the millionaire boss, until he saw her with another man and his heart finally ached. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's go back to our main character. The hum of the office was steady, a mix of ringing phones, clacking keyboards, and the distant whir of the espresso machine. It was the kind of morning where everyone moved with purpose, everyone except the one person nobody seemed to notice. Lena Torres pressed a stack of reports to her chest as she slipped through the glass doors of Hale Industries. The lobby smelled faintly of polished marble and fresh coffee. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the floor, a lonely little sound swallowed by the building's grandeur. She dipped her head automatically when she passed the executive elevator, even though she knew he wouldn't be there. Evan Hale never arrived after 8 a.m. He was the kind of man whose schedule bent the world, not the other way around. Still, her pulse quickened when a shadow moved behind the frosted elevator doors. For 1 second she thought, no, of course not. When the doors slid open, it was only a delivery guy wheeling in crates of sparkling water. Lena exhaled and hurried toward the side entrance reserved for admin staff. Invisible again, just the way the universe had decided she should be. On the 27th floor, she set the reports on the assistant supervisor's desk. He didn't look up. Nobody did. When she reached the 27th floor, the energy felt strange there too. People glanced at her for a second longer than usual, not with interest, but with a kind of curiosity, as though she had wandered into the wrong room. She tried to shrug it off and headed to her small station behind the storage cabinets. She powered up her computer, took a breath, and whispered to herself, just another day. But it was not. At 9:13 a.m., her phone buzzed. At that same moment, the private elevator dinged behind her, releasing a breath of cold, conditioned air that swept through the corridor like a silent announcement. Evan Hale stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, suit crisp, expression unreadable. His polished shoes clicked softly on the floor, each step steady, direct, confident. He didn't look left. He didn't look right. He walked past her, exactly the same way he passed everyone, like a man moving through fog. A force of habit, a habit built from power and distance. But Lena felt the air shift when he crossed behind her, like gravity pulling just a little harder. She dared a glance over her shoulder. Big mistake. Their shoulders brushed, not enough to matter, but enough to make her breath catch. Evan didn't pause, didn't blink, didn't even recognize bumping into her. Sorry, she whispered automatically, even though she wasn't the one who had walked into him. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the floor, a lonely little sound swallowed by the building's grandeur. She dipped her head automatically when she passed the executive elevator, even though she knew he wouldn't be there. Evan Hale never arrived after 8 a.m. He was the kind of man whose schedule bent the world, not the other way around. Still, her pulse quickened when a shadow moved behind the frosted elevator doors. For 1 second she thought, no, of course not. The cursor blinked. Her heart blinked with it. She didn't know it yet, not this morning, not while she faded into the beige walls, but something had shifted. Something small, something quiet. Something that would only reveal itself when she walked out of the building that afternoon, beside another man. And for the first time in his life, the millionaire boss, who had never looked her way, finally would. He kept moving, his attention fixed on the voice coming from the phone. I said no to the acquisition. If they can't deliver on Friday, we're done, he said, tone clipped. Lena watched him disappear around the corner. She shouldn't have stared. She knew better. Evan Hale didn't see people like her. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Lena. The kind of blur where nothing truly happens, but everything still feels heavy. She kept her head down, typing numbers into spreadsheets, answering minor emails, fixing tiny crises that nobody else wanted to bother with. At noon, she grabbed a small turkey sandwich from the break room, the cheapest option, and ate it at her desk while the others laughed loudly at the long glass table in the center of the office. She tried not to listen, but fragments of their chatter drifted toward her, each piece reminding her how invisible she was. When the clock hit 5 p.m., she packed her things quietly. A few coworkers slipped out behind her without saying goodbye, too busy planning happy hour. She walked toward the lobby, hugging her canvas tote to her side. Her phone buzzed with a familiar name, Noah. She felt a small lift in her chest. He had texted, "I am outside. Your mom asked me to remind you not to skip dinner again." She smiled at the screen, a tired, grateful smile. Noah had been around long before Hale Industries, long before she started believing that hard work could change everything. He was the steady kind of person, reliable like gravity. When Lena stepped out into the cool, late afternoon air, she saw him leaning casually against his old blue truck, hands in his pockets, warm grin on his face. She walked toward him, the sunlight catching the loose strands of her hair, and Noah opened his arms without thinking. She let herself sink into the hug for a brief moment. It was comfort. It was safety. It was everything she did not have inside that tall glass tower behind her. What Lena did not know was that at that exact moment, Evan Hale stepped out of the building. His conversation on the phone paused mid-sentence as his eyes locked onto the scene unfolding in front of him. The tight hug, the way Noah held her shoulders, the way she allowed herself to lean in, eyes closed for just a second. Evan could not hear anything, but he felt something sharp twist under his ribs. It was quick, like a spark catching on dry wood. He had seen relationships before. He understood closeness. But seeing that closeness from her, the girl he barely noticed 3 hours ago, made him freeze. He made himself continue walking toward his car, but his steps slowed naturally, almost involuntarily, as if some instinct refused to let him look away. Noah pulled back slightly and brushed a loose hair behind Lena's ear. Evan blinked, but the image stayed, stuck like a splinter. "Come on," Noah said warmly. "Your mom is waiting. I made chicken soup, the good kind, not the microwave kind." Lena laughed, and it was that sound that struck Evan more than anything else. He had never heard her laugh, not once. Not in the meetings, not in the corridors, not when she handed off documents or fixed problems he never even knew existed. He had never heard her voice sound like that. Light, unburdened, and not for him. Lena climbed into the truck, closing the door gently behind her. Noah jogged around to the driver's side. The engine coughed twice before starting, and they pulled away from the curb. Once the truck turned the corner, the spell broke. And as he drove away from the building, the reflection of Lena in another man's arms replayed in his mind again and again, each time landing like a quiet ache that he did not understand yet, but soon would. The next morning arrived with the same rhythm as always, but something in the air felt slightly off, like a song played half a beat too slow. Lena stepped off the bus and adjusted her tote bag on her shoulder, reminding herself that today would be like any other. She would slip through the doors, do her work quietly, avoid drawing attention, and go home. Nothing more. But when she reached the lobby of Hale Industries, the receptionist who usually ignored her suddenly straightened up. His eyes flicked toward the private elevator, then toward her, as if he knew something she did not. She offered a small, polite smile, the kind people give when they cannot figure out what is happening, and continued walking. When she reached the 27th floor, the energy felt strange there too. People glanced at her for a second longer than usual, not with interest, but with a kind of curiosity, as though she had wandered into the wrong room. She tried to shrug it off, and headed to her small station behind the storage cabinets. She powered up her computer, took a breath, and whispered to herself, "Just another day." But it was not. At 9:13 a.m., her phone buzzed. A message from the assistant supervisor. "Bring the Carter files to the executive conference room, now." Her stomach tightened. She had never been called to that room before. It was where department heads met with the CEO, and she was not even supposed to enter unless she was delivering bottled water. Still, she grabbed the folder with careful hands and made her way down the hall. She pushed open the door quietly, keeping her eyes down, and stepped inside. That was when she froze. Evan nodded slowly, watching her walk toward him, something unreadable flickering across his expression. She set the folder down and stepped back, ready to leave as quickly as possible, but he spoke first. "Lena." Hearing her name in his voice startled her. She had never heard him say it, not once. "Yes, sir?" she asked, clasping her hands together. He hesitated, as if searching for the correct words, then said, "How long have you been with the company?" She blinked. 2 years this month. "You left the office," he said, not accusingly but with something that sounded almost like concern. She straightened her posture. It is my lunch break, sir. Evan nodded, but did not move. Your supervisor spoke to you. Her stomach dropped. How do you know that? I could tell by his expression. And yours. She exhaled shakily. He said people are talking. He thinks I'm stepping outside my lane. Evan's jaw tightened, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked angry. Not at her. Not when she fixed the jammed copy machine, not when she carried heavy boxes of product samples, not when she stayed late to clean up after meetings she was never invited to. But she didn't complain, not out loud. Not even when her shoulders ached or when she glanced at the picture tucked inside her badge holder, the one of her mom smiling in a hospital bed. Lena moved down the hall with quick, small steps, trying as always to stay out of the way. I have been told your work is reliable, he said, returning to a more formal tone. Consistent, meticulous. She blinked again, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Nobody had ever used those words about her. Thank you, she whispered. Evan's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary before he finally stepped back. Leave the files, he said quietly. And, thank you, Lena. She turned to leave, her pulse racing with confusion. As she reached the door, she glanced back. Evan was staring at the chair she had just stood beside, as though the room still carried the echo of her presence. She slipped out silently, but not unnoticed. For the first time since she had walked into Hale Industries, someone had truly seen her, and that someone was the one man she had never expected. For the rest of the morning, Lena tried to shake off the strange encounter in the conference room, but the moment replayed in her mind like a song stuck on repeat. The way Evan had looked at her, the way he had said her name, the way his voice had softened when she mentioned Noah, none of it made sense. She pushed through her tasks with extra focus, purposely burying herself in data entry and email sorting, hoping the steady routine would steady her nerves. But around noon, another message arrived on her screen. Please bring the prototype samples to Office 27E immediately. The signature at the bottom made her stop breathing for a moment. E. Hale. Evan almost never contacted her directly. She gathered the prototypes with careful hands and made her way to the private offices. When she reached the frosted glass door labeled 27E, she knocked lightly. Come in, Evan said from inside. She stepped in, expecting a full room. But again, he was alone. He stood near the windows overlooking the city, sunlight casting sharp lines across his suit. He turned when he heard the door close, and the look he gave her made her heartbeat stutter. Not cold, not distracted, focused. You brought them, he said. She nodded and set the boxes on the small conference table beside him. If you need anything else, I can return later. She began to step back, but his voice stopped her. Stay a moment. He said it quietly, almost like a request rather than an order. She hesitated but remained where she was. Evan walked over to the table, opened one of the boxes, and lifted a sleek, matte black device. You prepared these files, he said. You organized the testing data. You sorted the defects. She nodded again, unsure where this was going. Evan set the device down and looked at her directly. Why has no one promoted you? The question hit her like a wave. She swallowed. I have never asked for a promotion. Why not? She shifted uncomfortably. People like me do not usually move up easily. His brow furrowed. People like you? She looked down. Administrative staff, workers from small towns, people with family obligations, people who cannot afford to take risks. Evan was silent, his expression unreadable. Then he said, Your work is better than people who already outrank you. She blinked, stunned. He took a slow breath, as if wrestling with something internal, and said, I want to understand something. That man yesterday, Noah. How long have you known him? Lena felt her cheeks warm. Since middle school. He is like family. He helps my mother with therapy, and he has known us since we were kids. I see, Evan said, but the way he said it sounded as if it mattered to him in a way it should not. Does he live with you? She frowned slightly. No, he just helps when my mother needs it. Why do you ask? Evan looked away for a moment, jaw tightening. No reason, he said, though it was clearly not true. For her. You have done nothing wrong, he said firmly. If anyone is questioning your place here, they can answer to me. She shook her head quickly. Please do not get involved. That will make things worse. Or better, he countered. She looked down at her hands, struggling to steady her voice. I am not used to being noticed, sir. And I am not sure I want this kind of attention. Evan's expression softened. She managed a small nod. Yes, sir. She stepped into the hallway, closing the door gently behind her. Her hands trembled as she walked away. She could not understand what was happening. She was nobody. She was the girl behind the storage cabinets, the girl who fixed jammed printers, the girl who never drew attention. And yet the CEO had spoken to her twice in one day. Meanwhile, behind the glass door, Evan stood still, staring at the prototypes but seeing none of them. He exhaled slowly. He hated the unfamiliar weight in his chest. He hated the way jealousy had carved its way into him the night before. He hated that he cared. But more than anything, he hated the fact that he had gone 2 entire years without noticing her. And now, suddenly, he could not stop. The following days unfolded with a rhythm that felt familiar on the outside but completely changed beneath the surface. Lena tried to hide in her routine the way she always had, but it had become impossible to ignore the way the air shifted every time Evan walked through the office. He was different, and that difference made everyone uneasy. On Monday morning, Lena arrived early and settled into her small station. She took a sip from her thermos of homemade coffee, opened her laptop, and tried to convince herself that whatever strange attention Evan had shown her would fade. He was a CEO. She was administrative support. People like him did not focus on people like her. At least, that was how the world had always worked. Yet, at 9:02 a.m., the private elevator dinged, and Evan stepped out. He moved with his usual confidence, but his eyes scanned the office with an unusual precision. He nodded at department heads, acknowledged a few team leaders, but his gaze did not stop until it reached her. Lena felt her breath stall. Evan hesitated for the smallest second, then continued walking as if nothing had happened, though she could feel his attention lingering even after he had disappeared into the executive wing. Her coworkers noticed. Whispered comments floated between desks. Why is he looking over here? What is her connection to him? Did she do something? Lena kept her eyes on her screen, cheeks warming, praying the moment would be forgotten. It was not. By noon, her supervisor approached her station with a rarely seen frown. Lena, can you step into my office for a moment? She nodded and followed him inside. He closed the door, crossed his arms, and looked at her with narrowed eyes. I have been getting the sense that you have been spending time with the CEO. Her head snapped up. No, sir. Not spending time. He only asked for some files. Files, the supervisor repeated, unimpressed. Lena, people are talking. You need to be careful. The last thing we need is the CEO thinking you are stepping outside your lane. The words hit her like a slap. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, feeling the familiar sting of being underestimated. I did not ask for his attention, she said quietly. Attention is not the issue. Optics are. Some people are already feeling threatened. She understood what he meant. Some people, meaning him, meaning the others who had overlooked her for years, meaning the ones who wanted to stay above her on the corporate ladder. She nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. When she left the office, her chest felt tight. The unfairness of it all pressed heavily on her. She had worked hard every day. She had sacrificed everything. And suddenly, the smallest recognition from the CEO had turned her into a target. She took her lunch break early, needing fresh air to clear her thoughts. Outside, she sat on a bench near the building's small garden courtyard, taking slow breaths. The city sounds wrapped around her, steady and grounding. That was when she heard footsteps. She did not look up at first, assuming it was another employee passing through. But the steps slowed, then stopped directly in front of her. She lifted her gaze. Evan. He looked surprisingly unsettled, as though he had been searching for her. You left the office, he said, not accusingly but with something that sounded almost like concern. She straightened her posture. It is my lunch break, sir. Evan nodded, but did not move. Your supervisor spoke to you. Her stomach dropped. How do you know that? I could tell by his expression. And yours. She exhaled shakily. He said people are talking. He thinks I'm stepping outside my lane. Evan's jaw tightened, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked angry. Not at her. For her. You have done nothing wrong, he said firmly. If anyone is questioning your place here, they can answer to me. She shook her head quickly. Please do not get involved. That will make things worse. Or better, he countered. She looked down at her hands, struggling to steady her voice. I am not used to being noticed, sir. and I am not sure I want this kind of attention." Evan's expression softened. He crouched slightly so he could look her in the eyes, lowering the barrier of height and status he usually carried like armor. "Lena," he said quietly, "I noticed you because you deserve to be noticed, not for any other reason." She swallowed hard, but before she could respond, an alarm rang faintly from inside the building, signaling the end of break periods. She stood quickly. "I should go." Evan rose slowly, his gaze lingering on her. "We are not finished with this conversation," he said. He lingered in meetings longer than usual, his eyes drifting toward the doorway as if expecting Lena to appear. He walked through common areas slower than he once did, his attention catching on the smallest details if she happened to be nearby. It did not go unnoticed. People whispered more openly now, though never loud enough for her to confront them. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking less like the untouchable millionaire CEO and more like a man unsettled by emotions he did not know how to process. "Thank you for the samples," he said. "You can go." She nodded and stepped toward the door, but just before she opened it, he spoke again. "Lena." She turned. Evan's expression was softer than she had ever seen it. "If anyone gives you trouble here, if anyone fails to see your value, you come to me. Understood?" Her breath caught. Lena did her best to stay out of sight, working through lunch, volunteering for tasks that kept her tucked away in supply rooms or archive storage. But invisibility was no longer an option, not when the CEO himself seemed unable to ignore her anymore. On Thursday afternoon, her supervisor approached her with a forced smile that did not reach his eyes. "Lena, we need you to assist with the product testing review for the investor demonstration tomorrow," he said. She blinked. She set the binder down, took a steadying breath, and opened it. The documents were dense with diagrams, test data, and dozens of corrections needing verification. She lost herself in the work, taking notes, cross-referencing numbers, and highlighting adjustments with meticulous precision. Hours passed. When she finally glanced at the clock, it was 7:24 p.m. Everyone else had gone home. She rubbed her eyes, stretched her stiff shoulders, and reached for her thermos, only to find it empty. She sighed and stood to refill it at the break room. The office was quiet in a way that only a skyscraper at night could be, humming with low electricity and the whispers of distant traffic. She walked into the break room, flicked on the light, and froze. Evan was there, alone. He stood near the counter, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He turned at the sound of the door. "Lena." The way he said her name, softer than the light itself, made her pulse skip. She swallowed and forced herself to move toward the sink. "I did not expect anyone else to be here this late." "Neither did I," Evan said, leaning slightly against the counter. "But tomorrow's demonstration requires more revisions than expected." She nodded, filling her thermos carefully. "I am working on those adjustments now." "I know," he said. "I saw the system logs. You have been working for hours." She stiffened, embarrassed. "I hope that is not a problem." Evan shook his head slowly. "No, it is impressive." She felt warmth rise in her cheeks. She capped her thermos and stepped aside, ready to leave, but Evan's voice stopped her. "Lena, may I ask you something?" She turned cautious. "Of course, sir." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Are you happy here?" The question hit her unexpectedly, almost painfully. She glanced down at her hands. "I am grateful for my job. That is not what I asked." She hesitated, then answered honestly. "I try to be, but it is hard when people think I do not belong." Evan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked genuinely troubled. "You do belong," he said. "More than some of the people who think they outrank you." She blinked, surprised by his conviction. "Thank you, sir." "Do not call me sir right now," he said quietly. Her breath caught. The room felt suddenly smaller, warmer. He took a slow step toward her, careful, deliberate, as though he was not entirely sure he had the right. "Lena," he said again, and her name sounded different in his voice this time. Not formal, not distant, real. "I want to apologize for something." She frowned. "For what?" Evan exhaled. "For not noticing you sooner. For letting others overlook you. For being one of them." Her heart pounded, unsteady and uncertain. "You did not owe me attention," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said, "but you deserved it." Silence stretched, soft and electric. She finally stepped back, needing air, needing space to think. "I should finish the investor binder," she said quietly. "Of course," Evan replied, though his eyes lingered on her with a gravity that felt like a confession he was not ready to speak aloud. She slipped past him and left the break room, her pulse racing. Behind her, Evan set his coffee down untouched, staring at the door she had just walked through. He finally understood the truth that had been pressing on him for days. "No, it is impressive." She felt warmth rise in her cheeks. She capped her thermos and stepped aside, ready to leave, but Evan's voice stopped her. "Lena, may I ask you something?" She turned, cautious. "Of course, sir." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Are you happy here?" The question hit her unexpectedly, almost painfully. She glanced down at her hands. "I am grateful for my job. That is not what I asked." She hesitated, then answered honestly. "I try to be." She tried to bury it under routine, making breakfast for her mother, checking her medications, and catching the early bus, but the thoughts clung to her like a second skin. By the time she reached Hale Industries, she felt raw and nervous, as if everyone could see the storm inside her. Today was the investor demonstration, and tension filled the entire building. He had gone years without noticing her at all, and now, one look from her could undo him completely. The next morning arrived with a weight that Lena could not name. She barely slept after the late encounter in the break room, replaying every word Evan had said, every look he had given her, every strange shift in his tone that made the air between them feel charged with something she did not understand. Once inside, he closed the door firmly and crossed his arms. "I received some troubling feedback this morning," he said. "It appears that some of your recent work on the prototype testing may contain inconsistencies." Lena felt her heart lurch. "That is not possible. I double-checked everything. I was here until after 7 last night." "Be that as it may," he replied, "there are concerns." "Concerns from who?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her with thinly veiled irritation. "From senior staff who believe you have been distracted lately." The implication hit her like a slap. She knew exactly what he meant. The whispers, the looks, the assumptions. The idea that the CEO had suddenly taken interest in her made people uncomfortable, and now they were turning their discomfort into accusations. "Sir, I promise nothing is wrong with my work," she said. "If you allow me to review it, I can show." "There is no time," he cut in. "Evan Hale wants the complete binder in 30 minutes, and if there are mistakes," he let the statement hang in the air. Lena felt her throat tighten. "Sir, please let me fix whatever someone claims is wrong." "Your insistence only makes this look worse," he said coldly. "It suggests you are panicking." Panic rose inside her, but she bit down on it. "I am not panicking. I just want to do my job." "Then do as you are told," he snapped. "Deliver the binder, and remember your place." She stiffened at the words. Remember your place. She had heard them before, in different tones, in different rooms, all her life. She nodded silently, collected the binder, and stepped out of the office. Her hands shook as she walked down the hall. She wanted to cry, but she forced herself not to. She would not break here, not in front of these people. When she reached the executive conference room, she paused at the door, steadying her breath. She knocked once and stepped inside. Evan looked up immediately. His expression softened the moment he saw her, but then his eyes drifted to her trembling hands. "Lena," he said, concerned, "what happened?" She swallowed hard and placed the binder on the table. "Your demonstration materials, sir." He did not look at the binder. He looked at her, carefully, intently. "Lena," he said again, quieter this time, "tell me what happened." She hesitated, then shook her head. "It is nothing, just work." "No," he said firmly, "someone upset you." She forced a tight breath. "People think I am distracting you. They think I am stepping outside my lane, and now they are questioning my work because of it." Evan's expression hardened instantly, a dangerous calm settling over him. "Your supervisor said this?" "He said others complained," she whispered, gripping her hands to stop them from shaking. "And he said I should remember my place." The silence that followed was sharp and icy. She stiffened at the words. "Remember your place." She had heard them before, in different tones, in different rooms, all her life. She nodded silently, collected the binder, and stepped out of the office. Her hands shook as she walked down the hall. She wanted to cry, but she forced herself not to. She would not break here, not in front of these people. When she reached the executive conference room, she paused at the door, steadying her breath. She knocked once and stepped inside. Evan looked at her with something deep and conflicted, something he was trying hard to control. "I do not care what they say." "But I do," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Something in Evan's expression cracked, a softness breaking through the shell of authority he carried everywhere. He stepped back just slightly, giving her breathing room, but his eyes never left hers. "Lena," he said quietly, "you deserve respect, you deserve recognition, and you deserve to feel safe in this building." Her throat tightened, and she nodded quickly before she could lose control. "Thank you, sir." He opened his mouth as if to say more, but voices echoed down the hall, signaling the arrival of investors. Lena stepped back immediately. "I should go." Evan watched her leave, every step she took pulling something in him tighter and tighter. As the door closed behind her, a cold realization gripped him completely. This was not jealousy anymore. It was not confusion or curiosity or guilt. It was something far more dangerous. He cared, deeply, maybe more than he should. And now, the rest of the world was beginning to notice. The investor demonstration moved forward with a polished intensity that echoed through every corner of Hale Industries. But Lena could barely focus on the distant sounds of presentations and applause drifting from the executive wing. Evan was staring at the chair she had just stood beside, as though the room still carried the echo of her presence. She slipped out silently, but not unnoticed. For the first time since she had walked into Hale Industries, someone had truly seen her. And that someone was the one man she had never expected. For the rest of the morning, Lena tried to shake off the strange encounter in the conference room, but the moment replayed in her mind like a song stuck on repeat. "You are not out of line," he said firmly. "They are, and I will make that clear." She shook her head lightly. "That will only make them resent me more." "Then they can come to me," he replied, "because I will not allow anyone in this building to treat you with anything less than respect." She glanced down at the navy blue handkerchief still in his hand. It was such a small item, but it held the entire shift in their story. A missed detail, a forgotten object. Lena nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "I am glad." He also asked for an internal review of all administrative processes, the supervisor continued. "He says he wants to ensure efficiency." She felt her stomach tighten at the implication. "Sir, Not now," he interrupted. "Just be prepared. Changes are coming." He walked away before she could ask anything else, leaving her sitting in a cold swirl of confusion and worry. She gathered her things slowly as the workday wound down. She wanted nothing more than to go home and forget the world for a few hours. As she stepped into the hallway toward the elevators, she heard a familiar voice call her name, Lena. Her breath caught. Evan was standing near the end of the corridor, away from the flow of staff heading out for the evening. His posture was controlled, but something restless flickered in his eyes. She hesitated before walking toward him. "Is everything all right, sir?" he exhaled, a quiet, measured sound. "We need to talk." Her heartbeat quickened. She followed him into a small meeting room, the kind used for private calls and policy discussions. The door clicked softly behind them. Evan faced her with an intensity that made it hard for her to breathe. "I reviewed your binder," he said. There were no inconsistencies, not one. Relief and frustration collided inside her. "I knew my work was correct," she whispered. "Someone accused you because they felt threatened," he said, his voice lower, edged with controlled anger. "People do not attack unless they see value." She looked down, unsure how to respond. Evan took a slow step closer, then another, until he stood just a few feet away. "And I need you to understand something," he said. "The only mistake I made here was allowing the environment to get to this point." Her eyes flickered upward. "You could not have known." "I should have," he insisted. "I should have noticed what was happening around you instead of being distracted." She swallowed, her voice faint. "Distracted by what?" He hesitated. The silence was heavy, alive, electric. "By you," he admitted finally. Her breath stilled. "Sir, I am not finished," Evan said gently. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, something she recognized immediately. The navy blue handkerchief Noah had given her, the one she had dropped at the gala. She wanted nothing more than to go home and forget the world for a few hours. As she stepped into the hallway toward the elevators, she heard a familiar voice call her name, Lena. Her breath caught. Evan was standing near the end of the corridor, away from the flow of staff heading out for the evening. His posture was controlled, but something restless flickered in his eyes. She hesitated before walking toward him. "Is everything all right, sir?" he exhaled, a quiet, measured sound. "My world felt smaller the moment I realized you were not in it," he said. She felt her pulse stutter painfully, beautifully. "Evan, say my name again," he said, barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then said it softly. "Evan." The sound of it seemed to undo him. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. "I cannot pretend anymore," he said. "Not about what I feel. Not about what I failed to see. Not about what you mean to this company, or what you—" He stopped himself, but the unfinished sentence hung between them like a confession. She forced herself to speak. "People will talk." "Let them," he said. "They have been talking already, and they will talk until I give them the truth." Her heart raced. "Which is?" Evan looked at her with a certainty that made her knees weaken. "That I respect you. That I value you. And that I will stand with you, no matter what comes next." The room felt impossibly small, the moment impossibly large, and yet it was only the beginning. The silence in the small meeting room stretched, warm and electric, holding everything that Evan had just confessed and everything Lena was too overwhelmed to process. She felt the weight of the moment pressing against her, a mixture of hope and fear, possibility and danger. She had spent years being invisible, unnoticed, unimportant. Now the most powerful man in the building stood before her, admitting that he saw her more clearly than anyone ever had. She stepped back slightly, needing air to steady the shaking in her hands. "Evan," she said quietly, "you cannot say things like that. People will think I am getting special treatment. They already believe I am stepping out of line." He took a measured breath, fighting the instinct to close the distance between them. "You are not out of line," he said firmly. "They are, and I will make that clear." She shook her head lightly. "That will only make them resent me more. Then they can come to me," he replied, "because I will not allow anyone in this building to treat you with anything less than respect." She glanced down at the navy blue handkerchief still in his hand. It was such a small item, but it held the entire shift in their story. A missed detail, a forgotten object. "You are not out of line," he said firmly. "They are, and I will make that clear." She shook her head lightly. "That will only make them resent me more. Then they can come to me," he replied, "because I will not allow anyone in this building to treat you with anything less than respect." She glanced down at the navy blue handkerchief still in his hand. It was such a small item, but it held the entire shift in their story. A missed detail, a forgotten object. "I have responsibilities, a sick mother, bills piling up, people who depend on me, and you live in a world I cannot reach." Evan stepped closer, slow and deliberate, stopping just close enough that she could feel the heat of his presence without him touching her. "Then let me meet you where you are," he said. "You do not have to climb into my world. I can walk into yours." Her breath trembled. "It is not that simple." "It can be," he insisted. "If we choose to make it simple." She felt her vision blur with the threat of tears she refused to let fall. She had spent her life holding everything together, being the stable one, the dependable one, the one who did not make waves. But this man, this impossible man, was unraveling her with sincerity she had never been offered before. "I am afraid," she said honestly. "I know," he replied. "So am I." The admission surprised her. Evan Hale, the man who faced boardrooms, investors, and billion-dollar decisions without blinking, was afraid. For her, for them, for what this meant. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. They both straightened instinctively, caught between two worlds. A young assistant peeked inside. "Sir, the investors are requesting a follow-up debrief." Evan nodded without looking away from Lena. "Tell them I will be there in a moment." The assistant left quickly, closing the door again. Lena nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "I am glad." "He also asked for an internal review of all administrative processes," the supervisor continued. "He says he wants to ensure efficiency." She felt her stomach tighten at the implication. "Sir, Not now," he interrupted. "Just be prepared. Changes are coming." He walked away before she could ask anything else, leaving her sitting in a cold swirl of confusion and worry. She gathered her things slowly as the workday wound down. Evan turned back to her, his expression softer but sure. "Lena," he said, "I am going to fix what happened in this building. The accusations, the disrespect, all of it. Not because of what I feel, but because it is the right thing to do." She nodded slowly. "And after that?" He exhaled, as if releasing a truth he had carried too long. "After that, I want the chance to know you, the real you. Not the title under your name, not the assumptions people make. You." They stepped out of the meeting room together, not touching, but walking, with an unspoken understanding that the distance between them was no longer impossible. As they reached the hallway, Evan paused. "Lena," he added quietly, "I meant what I said. I will stand with you." She nodded once. "And I will try to believe that." For the first time since she had joined Hale Industries, she did not feel invisible. She felt seen, valued, and complicatedly, unexpectedly cherished. And as she walked away, she understood that everything was about to change. Not because a millionaire had noticed her, but because someone had finally recognized her worth. And she was ready to step into whatever came next.